So welcome everybody to this webinar. What does it mean to be a senior business analyst? So my name is Yulia Kosarenko. I'm the author of the book Business Analyst, A Profession and a Mindset. I am business analyst at heart, even though I also worked as a business architect and enterprise architect, and I also teach classes at Humber College. But I will always be, I think, business analyst at heart. I speak to BAs all the time. We run a mentorship circle. I do some training. And today I want to talk to all of you about becoming a senior BA and what does it mean to be senior? What does it mean to make that career progression? And hopefully it will give you some ideas about your own career. So I asked before, like, what are your questions? Like, what do you want to know about becoming a senior BA? And I'll try to answer some of those questions today, but of course, feel free to pop your questions in the chat as well. So some of your questions may be, do I need special skills? Like, what do I need to be able to do? What is the difference between senior BA and junior BA? What are the soft skills to navigate maybe some tricky situations that a junior BA may not get in, but a senior BA would end up having to handle? Are senior BA roles more business-oriented or technical-oriented? What may stress out a senior BA, and what should I worry about? What other responsibilities? Are their responsibilities getting wider? How high are those expectations? And as one person told me before, do I even need that headache, right? So do you really want to be there? So, and at the end of it all, what should be my next steps? What can I do to get there if I'm not there yet, or maybe find that more senior position for the future? Because of course, we're all human beings. We all want to develop. We all want to know about which way it makes sense for you to move forward with your career, whether you'll be happy, whether you'll be satisfied, and what does it mean in terms of what you should do today. So what are the responsibilities of senior business analyst? Are they really different from a more junior or like a typical position? So I'll give you some ideas. And if you are doing a lot of these things already, then you probably are a senior business analyst, even if your position doesn't say so. Because in some companies, there's not necessarily such a gradation, or maybe someone already occupies a senior position, but you may be doing the same type of accountabilities that they have. So first of all, a senior analyst sometimes gets assigned to those large projects, to the important critical projects where it's really becoming like a most important thing to report to senior executives. How is this project doing? And you may be a lead BA on that. And being a lead BA also may mean that there is more than one analyst on the project, and then usually there is one leading them, because you have to coordinate and you have to share work and you have to share responsibilities. So being assigned to a major project, that's what sometimes happens to us with seniority. Knowing a wide range of BA techniques. So this is another one where a junior BA may be just, fresh, finished that course, and now I know how to do swim lane diagrams, and I do swim lane diagrams for everything, but it may not be enough for a senior role. So a wide range of technique means various facilitation techniques, knowing how to do different types of diagrams, various type of eliciting requirements, including job shadowing and interviewing and one-on-one questions and leading big workshops, and having that variety of techniques under your belt, because for different situations, you can't always use the same hammer. Another example could be working on business process improvements, right? So we all are used to having business analysts on IT projects, or projects where the main goal is to implement a system or modify a system. But sometimes a process may start with just improvements, where you need to analyze a certain business process, maybe in operations, and then propose how it might change. Whether it involves system changes or not is a different story, right? But the business process analysis comes first. And sometimes analysts are just working with business to analyze processes without necessarily that being tied to an IT project. Another potential responsibility, coordinating certain phases in the project, especially anything to do with business acceptance testing, because that needs a high level of understanding of business requirements, and that needs frequent communication with business users. And often senior business analysts end up leading, coordinating, or even executing business acceptance testing. Change management tasks, training, um, working on user adoption planning, maybe even like being like a new system ambassador, communicating, creating presentations that explain the purpose of the project, the purpose of the new system. So all of these are critical sometimes for the adoption for that new solution. And you need a lot of communication skills and ability to explain and ability to be like confident in front of an audience. And that also comes with seniority and with experience. Mentoring junior BAs. You may have a team. So at some point, I was a senior BA. We had a team of maybe 5 or 6. I would lead the weekly huddles, and we would basically just discuss what we do. And sometimes I'd give advice or come with someone to their meeting and maybe listen in and help them, give them some feedback later, or review someone else's documents. Or if someone junior comes into your organization, maybe someone has to explain to them, what's your methodology? What are your templates? What is the setup inside the organization? What are your relationships with IT? How you do certain things? So all of that mentoring is super valuable, and definitely with seniority also comes that accountability to help someone more junior than you. Methodology and templates. So that's another important one. And I don't know, pop in the chat, how many of you ever joined the company as a business analyst and it turns out that they have no templates? There's just nothing. Or, just do whatever you want. I know I've been in these situations multiple times, and let me know if you have been. But that's sometimes where you need to step in and say, oh, hey, I can do it. Let me create a template. Or maybe you're starting a new project and suddenly you care about templates because you are going to have, maybe you hired 3 different people and now you don't want them to do things differently because those become your communication documents, for example, with a developer or with a development team that is not collocated, or maybe even with external vendor. And then the templates and the methodology and the consistency of doing business analysis becomes important. So if you are a senior analyst, hopefully you will take on creating or adopting some templates if your company doesn't have that. Yeah, and I see someone already responding that they've created some templates for their organization. So that definitely is, again, it's a sign of seniority, right? Because it's your mentality. You think, yeah, you know what? It would help the process. Even if nobody asks you, even if it's a little extra work for you, you know that it should be done because it makes sense for the company. What else can we talk about? How about strategic analysis? So more junior analysts often are just assigned to project. And maybe they start with easy project and then with bigger project, but usually it's a limited scope. So someone else is providing you with the scope of what you do. However, as you become more senior, you may be involved in strategic analysis, a little bit of like bordering on what business architects do. For example, assessing multiple projects, assessing their cost benefit, ROI, helping with some strategic planning. And that also is part of what senior business analysts may do. So tied to that, cost benefit analysis, success metrics. If you are planning, for example, for next year or even for next 3 years, maybe there is multiple ideas in the business, some projects in the pipeline. You need to assess the ROI, potential return on investment, because most of the times, and again, I'm going to wave my hand, no company can ever execute on all the projects that everyone proposed, right? It doesn't happen. You have to choose. You have to find what makes most sense from strategic objectives perspective and from cost versus benefit. So a good business analyst that knows organizations and knows say data analysis methods and understands business processes that are currently in place can help with that cost benefit and can help define success metrics so that you can measure whether it makes sense to start, and then later on measure whether the project hit those goals, because a lot of those success metrics are tied to productivity, are tied to time spent, to quality, to customer expectations, and through business analysis techniques, we can help develop those. And finally, RFP preparation is difficult sometimes because you don't get necessarily the attention of all your stakeholders. You have to think structurally, you have to apply that system thinking. But it's a huge responsibility to contribute to an RFP, because based on those RFPs, sometimes major contracts get signed. So working with those external consultants and so on is important. And yes, in terms of cost benefit analysis, I can touch base on that later, but there is a few different things. I think I have a couple of handouts that I used before. Let me know if you want to learn more about it there. And all of these responsibilities that I mentioned, they really all combine to, for me to call it one thing: trusted advisor to business. And I really want to highlight it, because sometimes business analysts are treated more like, okay, there's errand people, you give them work, they do it, tell them to document things, they'll document it, tell them to test, and they'll test, because business analysts are very versatile. But at some point, you may actually become that advisor to business. And I know we chatted recently with one of you about recommending solutions or solution options to business, right? Sometimes you actually can give a recommendation to your business stakeholders. It's not necessarily the other way around, where you just listen to them to give you requirements. You can recommend the best solutions or the best solution options based on your experience. You can recommend to them which requirements make sense, which changes to the business process are going to be realistic or not. So being the trusted advisor is really where you're growing as a senior business analyst. Now, in top of that, and these are just accountabilities, and in different companies it may vary, but there are also specializations. And often when we become more senior, we may specialize also in a certain area. So one of these specializations could be by industry. So some analysts, for example, have worked in banking all their life, in telecom, in energy, in insurance, and they become so knowledgeable about that business domain that then they're getting headhunted because of their industry experience. And that means you're learning legislation, regulations, you know about the business rules, maybe you understand the mathematical side of things, for example, in insurance, and that makes you super valuable. And someone may choose to continue their career in a specific industry and become really indispensable. And in a way, it's a matter of choice sometimes. Someone prefers to be a generalist and someone really likes this position of being a domain expert. Sometimes you kind of flow into it because you end up working for bank after bank after bank, and then you get the next offer and the next offer. So it really depends. But if you, for example, if you wonder whether you can apply for senior BA positions and you're not sure how to sell yourself, think about, are you really an expert in a certain industry? And then maybe you can apply for senior positions in that industry. By business domain inside of organization, that's another way to specialize. For example, you may be expert on human resource and human resource information systems. You may be expert on finance. You could have had, for example, financial degree, and then you ended up working as a business analyst and working mostly with financial systems, and that's where you become an expert. You could be a marketing expert. And nowadays, I mean, there's a lot of companies spend a lot of resources on marketing automation and on applying AI and machine learning to modify and optimize their marketing strategies and targeted advertising and recommendation engines. And maybe you can specialize in marketing or sales. So this is another way to look at it, especially if, again, if you are already an expert in certain organizational domain. Another way, by skills. So that could be cybersecurity, that could be analytics. So it also depends on your interests. It could be user interface, right? And by product. And again, with the growth of major platforms, especially in the last like 20 years, think about major ERP platforms, etc. Sometimes analysts just specialize by being an SAP business analyst, Salesforce business analyst, Workday, ServiceNow, you name it. You probably can throw in a few more in a chat, or maybe if that's you are one of those analysts that specialize in a platform, please share, because that's another valid way. And interestingly, from this type of a specialization, you can grow into a solution consultant or implementation consultant, where you will be one of those consultants going into the client company to understand their needs, to understand their architecture, to understand their problems, and then perhaps recommend them the best solution, for example, the best Salesforce configuration or the best SAP configuration, etc. So these are all valid different ways, and I can see some comments in the chat, so we have some agreement, definitely. If you feel that you already specialize in any of those areas, please, if you don't mind, share as well, because it's also helpful for others to see. So I see a question: how would you grow skills in a specialization other than being a project? So of course, I mean, good question, Adam. It really depends on what it is. For example, I used to work in commercial insurance, and commercial insurance can get very, very, very complicated. You know, you can't even compare it with personal insurance. So if in commercial insurance, there is its own industry certifications. And I know that some analysts would go and get an insurance broker certification, etc., because it gives them that, you know, strong foundation. If you are in securities, for example, you can get a Security Exchange Commission certification. So I see Jerry mentioning, if you go with Salesforce or one of the platforms, they sometimes have their own certifications, right? I know major HRIS players also have certifications, and you have to balance it, because you don't want to invest extreme amount of time in just certification, but you could at least do one. Legislation, regulations, sometimes just brushing up on that even on your own, and you can show off your knowledge in an interview. Imagine you go for an interview and you're talking about, I don't know, securities, and you mention something that was just recently a legislation change, and you give your interviewer an impression that you actually understand what it means. It can play a huge role, right? Just to show off your knowledge. So some of these could be specializations. I know IIBA now starts to have specialized certifications. Some of it is just your experience. All right, let's talk about how else can you grow as a business analyst. And sometimes it is role fusion. It is when your role expands beyond just strict business analysis. And of course, it happens all the time. First of all, because many companies adopt agile methodologies where they tend not to even call out different positions. Everybody is a team member, but someone still is doing more business analysis. But also because in a smaller company or in a situation where maybe there's a hiring freeze, senior people are more likely to do another job, right? Or part of another job. So the most popular, of course, is a project manager. Some BAs want to become project managers, so they see that as a career path, even though they are very different. But I mean, it's of course up to you. But often you end up doing a little bit of project management. And I know I am the one where I had a project manager which was so busy with other projects that I did my own project management and was business analyst as well. Sometimes we fill in for project managers or scrum masters while they are away, or maybe there is a gap in that position. And again, because we're so organized, because we're good at documentation, because we're so good at leading meetings, that's kind of a natural, role fusion that you may see. However, what I want to caution you about, maybe project manager has a little bit higher grade in terms of the pay, but think whether you really want to do it, because true project manager is a very different job. Right, you're not going to be analyzing root causes and doing diagrams, or at least not the same kind. Project managers often have to work a lot with budget and scheduling and tracking things. So again, you have to gauge whether you like it or not, because there are other ways to grow, right? For example, you can grow into product owner, and I saw Aaron is also in that position, product ownership or product management, where you are really going more into the business stream and you care about a particular project and its development, and you become more of a business owner in that way. But if you really care about customer experience, for example, user experience, about the product itself, you may want to prefer this type of direction. Another one, team leader. And some companies will have a team of business analysts. In that case, maybe each business analyst is assigned to multiple projects, but a team leader also has a role. It could be mentoring and coaching. It could be distribution of work. It could be training and hiring, and even being a manager. And I think that business analysis team leaders is a very special role, because so much depends on the business analyst on the project, that the team lead role and that mentor role, where you help to grow business analysts, is really, really valuable for the company. So definitely, if you are in that position, or if you can be in that position, you're doing a big contribution. UI designer. So many systems and products now spend a lot of money and a lot of effort on customer experience, and that includes user interface. So any website and web app and mobile app, and many products that are now becoming kind of connected through internet, through IoT, it becomes really, really advanced, because our users, and especially after the pandemic, after the all were online, the users are very picky, right? They're very demanding in terms of what is a good user interface, what is not. I know when I go online and I see something that just doesn't make sense to me from customer experience perspective, sometimes I leave and I never come back. So being an expert in user experience is another very interesting direction, where you start to build storyboards and wireframes, and become a little bit of a graphic designer as well. And that is an interesting direction. And change management trainer. So we talked about change management activities like training, developing user documentation, presenting, explaining, promoting, creating videos, planning what change management activities to do, measuring adoption. So all of that support to make sure that solution gets adopted and used, because that's where your ROI comes in, right? Unless your solution is adopted and used, then you don't get the benefit. You've already spent the money, you put your cost is in the ground, but if you don't have the benefits. So this change management can play a big role. And I know some business analysts who became trainers, corporate trainers. They went into learning and development department, or they became, say, a change management lead. So that's another interesting area. And finally, business architect. So I left it to the end, but that's the path that I chose. For example, when I was wondering what to do after being a team lead for business analysts. So business architect is like a very strategic analyst. It's someone who looks at the whole enterprise, not just individual projects. And a lot of the skills and techniques in business architecture can be grounded in your business analysis knowledge. So really interesting. So I see some comments here and about problems of defined roles, and when different people think they own the same responsibilities, or they have the same responsibilities. So I think that RACI charts, even though they may be a little bit old-fashioned, are still valuable and are still helpful. But also you may find yourself sometimes being softly pulled into another direction, even if it's not in your official responsibilities. And then it becomes up to you. For example, if you're being pulled in a good direction that you are interested in anyway, why not go with the flow, take on those extra responsibilities? And then you can use that as an opportunity to say, hey, I've been doing this job already for half a year. For example, I was doing most of your business architecture deliverables, I was doing a lot of change management, and then you can use it as an argument for maybe moving to the next job, to the next position. But of course, if you are being pulled in a direction that is not interesting for you, then it's up to you how you want to handle it, and maybe that's not it. But I think that even things that racy and defining responsibilities and being clear, even though we say, okay, everybody needs to be agile and everybody needs to just do what they can best, a little bit of order and a little bit of an agreement could never hurt, right? Because otherwise, sometimes we get a little bit of a chaotic environment where it's not clear who is doing what. So business analysts can develop in so many areas. Of course, it's not all. You can become functional manager, an operations manager, especially if you've specialized. Or if you, for example, if you're a real expert in a certain domain and legislation, you may end up going into compliance department. So it really, really depends on what you're interested in. But I just want to kind of bring in this idea that not everybody should become a project manager as the next step, right? That's not really the only path. All right, so let's talk about key competencies now. What are those competencies you need to be able to do this and to grow and to develop? Facilitation. So a lot of junior analysts are scared of facilitation, especially if you have this big meeting, face-to-face. Imagine 20 people, senior people, all with their characters, all with their personalities. And suddenly you have to go in and you have to lead the meeting and nobody's even listening to you, or they don't pay attention, or they just have their own agendas, or you want to drive this question forward and they completely sidetrack you with something else. So facilitation can be scary, and it really needs a lot of practice, smaller groups, larger groups, larger groups. For a lot of junior analysts, it helps to let them practice with a senior analyst there just as a backup, someone to help them out if they get into sticky situation. But at some point, you need to be able to do it. So I know, for example, in my experience, at some point, I had to organize a 3-day, it was called solutioning workshop. So for 3 days, we had a large group of people, VPs, directors, and representatives from our software vendor. And we had to go through all of our use cases and all of our major functionality and discuss feasibility and planning and what are the prioritization, and basically make up a project plan for a huge project based on dependencies and the value. It was scary to prepare for that workshop. And I remember after that workshop, I was ready to take a vacation. I was so tired. But it's a huge win if you can do it. So practicing your facilitation from smaller groups to larger is really important. Negotiation. Oh my God. Again, going back to the example of RFP and working with external consultants or representatives from external vendors and trying to find that middle ground between what they want to sell you and what your company really needs. So all that liaison, negotiation internally, where you have to be subtle because usually you don't have an upper hand. You have to go with subtly influencing others. So those are all the people skills that are really helpful. Communication. And of course, communication is one of those staples for business analysts, written, spoken, but I highlighted here specifically senior executives, communication with senior executives, because again, it can be more scary, but sometimes these are the people who make decisions. If you only communicate at the lower level with other SMEs, but actually they are not making any decision, their superior does, sometimes you need to present to those superiors, present your arguments to them, or explain to them what the real options are, or explain to them why this particular solution is not feasible or is not possible, and you recommend something else. And that also can be sometimes scary, and you may be a little bit apprehensive, but it comes with seniority in business analysis, that ability to communicate to others who have more power and not being scared, especially if you know that you're right, that you know why you're saying it, you have your arguments, you have your analysis done. If you ever felt scared or apprehensive going and doing that, also let us know. Conflict resolution. you end up with two stakeholders that disagree with each other, for example, about the priority or about a very, very critical requirement. If you do it one way or the other way, there's no turning back, and you are in the middle. You have to figure out how to resolve those conflicts. Ideally, it should be rational resolution with analysis, pros and cons, different scenarios. Here is expected outcome in one scenario versus the other. But again, first of all, you should not be scared of having to deal with it, because if you think about it, a project manager, if they encounter a requirements-related conflict, they would be delegating it to business analysts. But who are you going to delegate it to? You really have no one else. If you delegate it back to business, then it will be like a power play sometimes. But you don't want power play to decide a requirements conflict. You want it to be logical, and you want it to be justified with cost and benefit, not necessarily with, who has more power or who doesn't want to argue and who doesn't mind arguing. Problem solving, starting with root cause analysis, but again, it's also a wide spectrum of what are the levels of the problems you're solving. It can be a very minor problem, or it can be a major design challenge. So sometimes these become architecture challenges. For example, there is a certain requirement, and to be able to implement it, we need to make a major architecture change. We need to add a new integration. We need to modify the whole data model. Is it worth it? And what does it mean? So you end up as a senior BA in the middle of this really architecture level discussions where A, you need to explain to technical people what exactly business wants. B, technical people then tell you, hey, it cannot be done this way because 1, 2, and 3, because our data model doesn't allow it, or because our systems are integrated in a different way. You have to understand it, so you have to have enough technical acumen to understand it. And then you have to explain it to stakeholders and probably facilitate a larger meeting where these design challenges are handled. So again, you cannot avoid design challenges, and anyone who thinks that business analyst gets a sign off on requirements and moves on needs to realize that the hardest is still ahead of you, because whatever requirements were captured, you don't really know whether they're all feasible, and you don't know what technical challenges will be encountered later. And sometimes it could be even with an external vendor. They promised you everything, and then as they start working, they say, oh, we didn't realize you do it this way. We can't actually do it. And then this big problem comes in. Leadership. And leadership, again, comes in different variations. And a lot of things I mentioned already are related to leadership and engaging stakeholders. But now, again, I want to go back to mentoring junior BAs, supporting junior BAs, and protecting them. And as a team lead or as a senior BA, sometimes you need actually to protect a junior team member who may not be able to handle a certain situations because they don't know, they don't have enough experience, or because it's a very strong opinionated stakeholders. Sometimes you need to step in and protect them. Technical acumen, including solution options assessment, including resolving those challenges. So here is where you may be actually inching into architecture, solution architecture. And you can't be a senior BA and again, close your eyes and never look into architecture diagrams, right? Say, no, that's all technical. You have to understand solution architecture. You have to understand the main systems and how they're integrated. You have to know something about data architecture. You have to understand data models. Again, otherwise you will not be able to deal with challenges. You will only deal with like easy things. But yeah, and I see some of you agreeing. It's so connected, right? It's like the defining solution requirements without getting into any of that. You become a little bit of a, someone sitting in an ivory tower, and it's really not realistic. And design thinking, right? So continuing with the same topic, companies are becoming so complex, and landscapes, architecture landscape are becoming more and more complex. If you want to implement Salesforce, do you need to integrate it with other systems? If you need to replace your HRIS with another HRIS, what does it mean in terms of integration and data model and data warehousing and existing analytics that will need to change. So you have to get involved in all that, and you have to make friends with your development team, architecture team, with your solution architects. You can learn from them, and also you will be much more efficient as a business analyst as well. So openness to learning, I mean, I don't have to promote it to you. You're all here. And I think for us to learn and for us to become experts, we always have to be ready to learn and ready to adopt new ideas and expand our knowledge and read up and practice. And that's just, without it, we're just going backwards. Finally, the mindsets. A lot of things I talked about. If you ever met me before, you know I love talking about BE mindset. And I think a lot of what I mentioned here is also about having a business analyst mindset where you care about solution. You care about finding solution to the right problem. It's not just about you writing requirements and going home and getting paid. It's about seeing that the system and the solution that you worked on capturing requirements for, that it actually works and it does what it's supposed to do. So a lot of this comes also from that be a mindset, from caring about solution. So I'll share with you, if you don't have it yet, it's a little poster with 12 principles of BA mindset. And I think every senior business analyst has to live by these principles, right? So you want to focus on business goals, okay? Not on which stakeholder has more power, but what makes sense to the strategy of the company, what makes sense to that roadmap. Solving the right problem. Make sure that you know what problem you're solving. Don't just patch it up, but go for the root cause. Ask questions. Assume that stakeholders don't give you everything. You have to question and discover and look for things. So you have to be that leader and facilitator, and you have to analyze and take responsibility for analysis. Don't expect that stakeholders are just gonna give you requirements. Here you go, here are our requirements, write them down. Because it's not real, right? You have a job to do. So I'll be happy to share this BA mindset with you, definitely. And I'll send you an email later with an attachment. But just go back to it, whether you're a business analyst or product owner or project manager or product manager. And even we just had that conversation recently with Fabrizio, who is also very interested in BA mindset, Fabrizio Laguna. And we talked about how even CEO, even chief executive officers, they also need to have this BE mindset, because they also need to care about analysis of the problem and optimizing the right problems and simplifying any process that is overly complicated because it leads to waste and so on. So that's your mindset, right? And in terms of some specialized knowledge, and we'll wrap up with specialized knowledge, what could you learn? So for example, if you are very interested in business process and business process optimization, learn about different optimization methods, learn process analysis techniques, learn about process mining. There are some really incredible tools now on the market for process mining using data analysis and machine learning. Learn about value stream mapping, Six Sigma methodologies. So this type of specialized knowledge can lead you in that direction of being senior, say, process improvement analyst. And that, especially, at companies like manufacturing, like customer service, anywhere where there is this repeatable processes, it can be huge value to them. A user experience. So I mentioned before, some analysts, especially if you're kind of design-minded, you're artsy, you may really enjoy being involved more in customer and user experience. So starting with user journey mapping and learning more about user experience research and visual design, usability, accessibility. These are really huge topics nowadays, especially accessibility. And many companies, by the way, are struggling to find accessibility experts. So that's another interesting area of career growth. Data and analytics, another huge area. Think about understanding data, capturing data management requirements, working as business analyst for a data warehousing project, for data analytics projects, getting involved in data science in your organization, getting involved in developing some machine learning AI solutions. So A lot to learn, of course, here. And I'm going to be actually publishing a new course on it in about a month if you're interested. But different types of data, how to map data, how to create data dictionaries, what is analytics requirements, how do you capture analytics requirements, knowing, for example, querying methods like SQL's structured query language, being able to do ad hoc analysis yourself. So some business analysts may get involved into analytics and become business intelligence analysts, and maybe even end up going into and learning more about data science. So that's another one. And of course, there is more, but the last one I wanted to mention today is strategic analysis. And that's if you're interested in business architecture and enterprise architecture. So you can start with business capability mapping with strategic tools like SWOT analysis, business model canvas, learn business architecture fundamentals. And again, a lot of demand for business architects for any company who is planning to do digital transformation or any of those major projects. Really, you need more than just business analysis, you need business architecture. So these are just some ideas, and hopefully already, none of this mentions project management, right? It's all other things. But I think that as business analysts, we have that the logical and rational mindset, but we also know how to communicate people and how to understand people. And the really capabilities are endless. And your options are only limited by your imagination or by your, I guess, energy to get involved. And hopefully each one of you was able to see some of the ideas in what I mentioned here. If I missed any of the comments, I'll go through them at the end. But so hopefully you got some ideas about what could give you a boost for your next career move. And if you're not senior, to become a senior analyst. And if you are a senior analyst, again, where to move next. So I still have a couple of things to share with you, but in terms of kind of official slides, I just wanted to finish with this and give you these ideas. Now, what I wanted to share with you, I'll leave this with you as just as a little diagram of business analysts and their various interactions, because they interact with so many different roles in different ways, with project managers, with business stakeholders, with QA teams, with development teams, and with architecture teams. And each of those interactions is different. What you give them, what you take from them, what you ask, and what you provide. So that's another aspect of being a senior analyst, is knowing how to interact with all the different project roles and roles in your organization. And finally, seniority is all about taking responsibility for thinking, taking responsibility for analysis, taking responsibility for protecting your junior BA, taking responsibility for resolving conflicts instead of waiting for instructions. So that's this big difference. A junior BA may ask for help, for instructions. What am I supposed to do next? How do you want me to do it? When you become a senior BA, you have to determine it, right? And I see some of you are in agreement. So taking responsibility for that shared understanding of requirements, for quality of business analysis, it's up to you. Nobody's going to tell you you have to understand whether you're doing a quality job, and taking responsibility for thinking. So really, this is what being a senior business analyst is all about.